There, you see it? I use that to motivate myself. Okay, another speedy refactoring. I have 20 minutes, basically. Let's see if we can get something going here. Last time, I think it was the world parts, and that was good because what did we achieve? Put some of it into assets, world parts. And it looks like, okay, there's still somewhere else. Okay, vestigial cleanup. Oh, wow. Okay, Visual Studio was updated. So there you go. Under the time, I'm thinking that this struct itself could go away. So I'm assuming that it's going to be that. And this one, world parts, going to be like that. And then this should be here. Yeah, that's probably like, how much is that? Maybe inline it. Let's see how that goes. Yep, let's look at inlining it. See where that gets called. It doesn't get called. Are you kidding me? Build. Rebuild. Yeah. So this is another one of those. Gonna have to assume how many there are, but that's in my mind completely reasonable. Yep. Called from assets, both of them. Okay. So let's just put in here somewhere. Static. Look, file local is what I'm thinking. Again, Carmackisms, single call site. You know, it should be inline, really. Let's see how that goes. And parts. Asset. So yeah, what part pull? This stuff is going to get cleaned up seriously. Part class. These days, class is called kind. Yep. Let's call it world part kind. World part kind. Offset names. Probably get used in several places. World part offset names. World parts saved. So that's like immediate inlining right there. some minutes. Some minutes. There are only 2 minutes. What game? What game is that? That is the Wolfenstein that was done on the Quake 3 engine, the multiplayer. There's some sort of shout out. There are only 2 minutes. I thought that was kind of fun. And the reason I think that's fun is because of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was somewhat of like a household god, or at least severely appreciated around the house by my father, certainly, and by me, because it seemed like he had an awesome work ethic. You know, just shut up and work. And I'm trying to be like that. I'm not saying that I am, but I'm aspiring. Okay, got kicked in the butt because I needed to call that from somewhere else. So world parts save needs to be called from somewhere else. You see world parts save. And that's interesting, just all constant. Something in that one should go away, and we just call that one. All parts save at when the program is going down. So this call site is in the editor. Yeah, it all just falls out. Because there's no folder class, you just go to the array directly. What? Okay, there is no such. There is no such thing. So it's an array. It's similar to the way the models got done. It's just an array, and we are assuming that it's that many, which is fine because I say so. No, because it's sort of implicit in the constraints of the program that's why all the constants are mashed down to here. Like this is like an overview of the whole design. So yeah, I was looking to parallel arrays in that case. And here again, parts. So this is interesting. Yeah. This stuff is now in assets, so you get rid of that. When do I have to leave? I have to leave at this one, 14:01. Yep. So I have 15 minutes basically. And now we're getting link wrongs because build world got changed. I know that they're called linker errors, but it's fun to do Swinglishisms. Link fail. So, you know, and fail is wrong or false, I suppose. To say that something is fail is to say that something is wrong. So it's fun to do those kind of, you know, back and forthy sillinesses. And here's another vestigial thing. So you have to search for that struct forward, and that might mess some stuff up because we got rid of that one. And now we're seeing, yes, world part t parts. is what it should be. And that one's gonna mess with us. No. Right, immutable build world. Oh, yeah, look, we got the squigglies. The squigglies are saying function definition not found. So that's kind of cool. It scans like the whole thing or all the files and figures out that, yeah, we haven't implemented that. And then it finds out that, yeah, it resolves that. So that's cool. And look at that. Look at all of that crap that's in the assets. The world parts, the light grid, and the world meshes. That's awesome. Look at that. You can even go to one line. Isn't that nice? So that's one of those really clear instances of the cross-cutting concerns were there anyway, right? This build world function, it required all that stuff. But now that I'm putting it all, figuring out where all of the immutable stuff is, you're starting to see that things are starting to flow together. Look at that. You could probably, because we're passing this sector, and then we're doing a lookup of the environment. Yeah, we can do that one as well. What's this saying? Doesn't take 6. Right, VC build. Where's that one? So that's the same. Grid and meshes. Get rid of those. What's the difference? This one is the one that checks the cache. Right. So assets X light grid. And that is a loading function. So it's going to mutate the that stuff's going to load them in. Immutable build world. Oh, it's going to be fast. Woo! It's just all assets, X world meshes. Look at all that stuff. It's all going away. That's another one, but I'm not going to do that right now. All right, what's it saying? Okay, that's another thing. That's the mesh, I suppose, of the. Yeah. Let's just see if we can get through this. What does phone say? Netflix out of a film that I might like. Well, we'll have to see. Look at that. Rock and roll. I think we're going to have to do a test of removing the cache, as usual, just to make sure that it works. Call the cops. It works. Awesome. Okay, moving on. I don't even remember what we were doing last time. Whoa. Okay. Any case. Can I remove headers? But anyhow, that is right. That one goes away. I'm guessing this is something that gets used on the stack. Right, those are the multipliers. That gets set up. Yep. How does that work? Let's look at that. Get set up. Right, from the simulation and timing, and are the beams on and color channel enable. Right, there seems to be some concept of world power bits. Excuse me. So sometimes, I guess theoretically you could turn them on or off. I don't like the constructor. I would say at least I would say make color multipliers. Like that. Right. Result. Result. So certainly in the category of work, as in on the stack, algorithmic, not state or sticking around between frames, between ticks. Looking at the cache represents, no, stop it. All of that's in World Builder. Look at that. I'm gonna guess. That most of that stuff could be local. To the translation unit. To the module. Modulaire. Look at that. Like, you need to rebuild the project when you remove files, because there's a lot of caching going on, and in the build output. So all of this stuff's in World Builder. Yep. So it needs to know what the cache is. There's going to be something called a cache here. Look at it, it's got constructor destructors. Oh wow, does it really need them? Probably not. Come on, man, work on your tone, man. Be happy. We're coding. Yay. Oh, it's not working. Sorry. I'm tired. Cool, that works. Where is the constructor destructor? Here. Stuff is not public. This one goes here. That one goes here. Yeah, come on. Okay. Scarp yourself, as Peen would have said. Isn't this kind of loop through a standard vector and delete everything? Isn't that what what's in here? Standard vector set delete queue and clear. Yeah. Sis. Cool. Is that ever used? What is that, like statistics? Yeah, it's statistics. So we're talking about a couple of classes, structs. That are very local here. So it obviously doesn't get passed around. Okay, there's a point. It's passed around there. But where is it? There it is. Does that still work? F2. The bookmark stuff. Kind of curious about bookmark. Control K, Control N. So I can go Control K, Control N. There is a bookmark there. Wow, that's cool. So yeah, I made a bookmark. Bookmark! So I'm thinking that I could do the construction there, cache.vertices page. No more constructor. And at the end of the scope, no more destructor. This one's fine, I guess, because That used probably is. There's matching going on. Match for material. Yeah, okay. Cool. Inlined. All that stuff is now work. You need to commit. Commit. Procrastifacting. This has been a now we're almost done. This is interesting because now what do we got? We got immutable in the view controller case is assets and constants. So this is just like constants, like really constants. Just a bunch of stuff that comes from all over the place that is just stuff that we want to be constant. My style now is that things that are just literals, they end up being defines, obviously inconsistent in terms of case. Don't really mind that so much. Some things, typical enumerations, very typical that, you just put a bunch of stuff in and then in the end, you get automatically a count. That's a cool style. Stuff that's enum class, enum struct obviously works as well. This is just to scope it. And just a little bit more stringence, so you're not using integers for that. Again, just a bunch of enumerated constants, and you need the total count. Sounds, renderers, text for the util effect, the HLSL effect. Yeah, some of this stuff is implied in arrays of. Yeah. This is Wang tiles. Wang tiles 2 corner. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. Wang tiles 2 corner. Maxis. Yeah, who cares? Anyway, just constants, and some stuff is like structs that are like global constants. And I'm totally fine with, think about it, like a global constant. What's the problem with that? That's just like, that's fine because it's immutable. It's just a constant, and it's like stuff that are, it's just packaging, really. Vertex declarations, blah blah blah. But then the thing is, here's the big chunk of stuff, which is assets. Things that are authored externally, like textures and sounds, get loaded in, and then they're immutable for the whole duration of the program. Other things are like animations, which are edited in this tool environments as well. Those things are, I'm reading text files, which are the effects. That's the whole DirectX utility effect thing. Meshes, hard meshes, in my mind, are things that are just up on the GPU. They get pushed to the GPU. Vertex buffers are meshes. Hard meshes, as in hardware meshes. Blend mesh, that is a hardware mesh that is animated, so it's a little bit split up into vertex streams. Effects in this case, not HLSL effects, but particle effects. And yeah, this part of the refactoring, these are probably just, what are they? World parts. Just a bunch of offsets. And then when the actual world is built, it's a bunch of meshes are pulled in and name matched from OBJ files, from model files, 3D model files. And then this stuff is per level immutable. Yeah, the meshes that get built and the light grid for moving entities. So it's like a probe-based system, basically. In any case, that's immutable. And then there's main for entry point program. App is like the harness for Windows and all the DirectX stuff. There's a base class for that actually, just to whatever your operating system window needs are. Look at this. I'm going to move these out. Very typical. I don't want more stuff as member functions than I really need to. Does the destructor do anything? Pushes some animations and stuff. Yeah, that could be done in init and cleanup really. I'll leave it alone. So you end up with and I prefixed that, just because that's part of the evolution. That's part of the namespace discussion actually. That's a good. Yeah, let's do that. Let's look at that. Let's go back. Really good example. We're there. Okay. So from main, you're seeing a lot of stuff like this. Here the application object here. It's ZFighter namespace, and so I still tend to use namespaces at the highest level for a project, and then there's this view controller app, and this style with double underscores is that's actually module local variables, right? In this module, in main, right? So here's some virtual file system stuff. But anyway, it's double underscore for like static local stuff. But you see stuff like this. You tend to see, because WinMain, you're not in a namespace, you tend to, you have to prefix, right? I think. No, great example there. Look at that. I don't have to. That is in the namespace ZFighter. It's actually in there. But I don't have to qualify that, really. Because, why don't I have to qualify that? Because you can't see these pop-ups. Look, that's sad. But look at this. This thing here, VC assets, is in a namespace. It's in the namespace ZFighter. So because the compiler knows that the thing that's getting passed is in a namespace, it'll figure out and match what free function you're actually calling. And that's why I don't like namespaces, in a nutshell, because you can defeat them. Like this looks like it's in the global namespace, but it's not. And you don't have to. If you type that, it's like, what does it say? What's the error? It's not a member of the global namespace, but it looks like it is. It's in ZFighter. So that's the main reason I'm moving away from like hierarchies of namespaces, because I want it to be globally qualified. Because in my mind, I would like to have to do that, because that's the point in my mind of namespaces. You're actually globally qualifying what is this, where is it, So I was, and that's what I was going to show you in this case here. Yeah, that's what I've done with all the common stuff, like the stuff that's shared between projects, among other things. The DX9 system is. That stuff is all straight up in the global namespace, and that's why I've done the prefixes there. But what I tend to do in games, like here, is that there is a overarching namespace for the entire game. But previously, I would have a ZFighter, and then I'd have a VC inside it, and maybe in other cases even deeper hierarchies of namespaces. And in general, I'm not liking the hierarchies. But what I wanted to show you was this. Let's just do the init. If we did this, you're in the ZFighter namespace, but you have basically looks like a global function called init that takes the app, right? And let's work on this. And look, we're calling it from the global namespace, and it says, hey, that works. So there's a free function, it's called init. It's actually in ZFighter. And that in this case, I don't think that would be better, because like, what, ZFighter init? So what, that's just in the whole game. Is that a model thing, or is that a view controller thing, or what is that? So that's why it's bad. That's why that's why I'm not liking the namespaces, and why I, in this case, feel like app, that works, but that looks terrible because it's like, what init are we talking about? And those are the cases you get into, because that's like an object-oriented or vestigial from getting away from object-oriented programming. You could argue that, it's better if it's a member function, because then you're at least calling it off the object, and then in that case, it's a member and you know where to look for it. Sure, but I don't want to be object-oriented, so I'm going to eat this style. That's just, I guess, it's a trade-off, I suppose. But I like the self-documenting nature of it. So yeah, app init, and that is that is like, you could argue back and forth, like what's the point of moving these out? Because in this case, it is object-oriented because I'm doing inheritance because of the way that the framework for the DirectX startup works. This is how all my apps work, because this is just what I've refactored to over the years. Arguably, the original style of these examples back from the SDK were actually function pointers that you had to throw all these function pointers in somewhere, But it was messy, and that's why, in general, I argue like this style. If you just look at what this is basically an interface, a Java style interface. It has some members, some metric things, but basically it's just a bunch of pure virtuals. There are some cases here where they're virtuals, like if you want to do off-take processing, if you want to do, change how your background sleeping works, that kind of stuff. If you want to pause time when you're minimized, yeah, it's messy, but I'm fine with the object-orientedness here. So you could argue, you're doing object-orientedness, why are you moving free functions out in this case? It's just that, in general, I would love for everything to be free functions. It would be great to be able to say that in some magical way that, to be able to pass this in, in an interface style of way to the system and say, this is maybe I'm talking about Ruby duck typing. It's like, if it walks like a duck, if it sounds like a duck, it is a duck. Maybe not. But in this case, I'm gonna I guess it's one of the last cases where I think that the idea of interfaces is pretty cool. But I don't really like the fact that it forces me to use member functions. That's also why I'm using this, in my mind, awful color for member functions, just to know that stuff. Whereas yellow for free functions. But that's why it looks the way it does. Also, I tend to use this the underscore prefix for all member variables because there are cases, because in this you're having this. Let's look for. Yeah. There's no good. Yeah, here for example, this is a callback for do a frame and this, and as look at this, as fast as possible I'm trying to get out of the object orientedness, so I'm doing it that way. But I guess there are cases where it's like look for, what is that? That's a weird stuff. Anyway, that's just what I tend to do when there are member methods. So I know that this is a member. Other code styles would be my im world, right? And that's exactly the same thing. It's like it's instead of the my. So that's just what it is. So I prefer having to do that, like, okay, everything is just a free function and you're operating on it. And also, a comment is that the whole prefix of app, you could argue that you don't need it because these things could be somewhere else. They don't have to be, in the whole, there's a header and there's a CPP for every class sort of thing. But this is like one of the things you would find happening in your first refactoring when you're just getting away from object-oriented explicitness, this happens. You just, you move them all out, and instead of this, you actually explicitly pass the thing, right? And in simple cases like this, it's like, why don't you have member functions? Like, there's really no argument either, in either direction. It's first when you have VC other thing T other thing, then it's like cross-cutting concerns. It's like, is this really the app's method logically? Is app the first-class citizen, or is the other thing the other first-class citizen? Then cross-cutting concerns. You could do that. It's just something I think people should think about. Trying to get away from the idea that you're thinking, one function argument, the app in this case, is the first-class citizen. It's his method. I'm trying to get away from all that stuff. It's Hen's method, as you'd say, to be politically correct. And now in Sweden, we made up a pronoun. I think we're the first in the world we did that. We made a gender-neutral pronoun. In Sweden, so he is han, she is hun, and neutral is hen. So isn't that great? Isn't that like super useful? In any case, I'm going to commit that. But I'm not going to get into a gender Procrastifacting gender discussion at all here. I'm going to talk about code. So one of the things I've been looking forward to, totally tangenting all the time here, but my point is, generally I want an immutable part and a mutable part, and then a bunch of just work, algorithms that get split up in all these different files just for, for modularity and, easier to find stuff. But here, this is going to be fun because I've been looking forward to this one. In the mutable state, there's a bunch of stuff, but there is state also in a sort of controller aspect of stuff, like all the editors stuff have been refactored out. Like the animation editor has some stuff, and environment editor has some stuff, and we're using that enum, that qualified enum to select. So the meta controller is like this big multiplexer. It's like, okay, what are we doing? We're doing input every frame, and we're doing output. So we're handling input and we're drawing. That is the dual nature of the controllers in my version of Model View Controller. Am I recording this? Yes. So there's an input pass and there's an output pass. And instead of having polymorphism here, you could have like a controller point you to a base class and then switch and point to different ones and just delegate it. It's just, I tend to not want to do that. So to begin with, let's see, there's still some stuff in here that I guess you could really flatten as much as possible. If you look at the controller here, play settings, for example, what is that? Like, let's start from the beginning, members play settings, because again, I like the idea of just flattening all mutable state into one struct. So settings, what does this thing do? It inits some stuff. Cool. So the thing to do is to just grab it and find the constructor for this thing and blah, just straight up inline it there. And so that is play settings, or what's the member called? Settings, right? And I want to melt them. I want to melt them. And so obviously, look at that. We never pass, or yet maybe we do. I'm thinking, do we pass the play settings by reference to that struct? I'm thinking that we probably don't. So we're gonna do that style. Prefix. So now we look for VC play settings T. Are we passing? There's one. There's one. So yeah, here's all the stuff that before was member functions, right? So meta controller T. meta, or let's call it controller, because now they're part of that thing. And those of you who are observant, you know, the goal will be that these things also get merged, but you know, one thing at a time, not to do too big of a refactoring. This thing is here because it's transient. It's a stack-based thing, so it's just a utility that gets created apparently here. Yeah, because there's a lot of different cameras, different styles of cameras, third person, first person, mouse look, all that kind of stuff. And what the renderer needs is just this stuff. So that's some demultiplexing of what camera is going on and where's it looking, all that kind of stuff. Yep, we need to tell the people that there is a meta controller, and then we just do that. Maybe I should use map mode here, yeah. Let's use map mode. I'm actually not looking at map mode, but now I'm looking at map mode. And I guess you could do this, controller 5 occurrences replaced. Yep, and do it again. Wow, 79. Look at all the hierarchies. Like, that's what I don't like. Like controller.cameras.thirdpersoncamera1 heading. There's so much a tendency in my experience that you just want to hierarchize the verb form of making hierarchies. And obviously, I guess that makes a little bit more sense when you're doing encapsulation and you're hiding. And in this case, like, you can't do that. You can't just, you know, access private member, access private member, access private member. But if you get over that and you say that that's fine, then you start realizing you have a tendency to do divide and conquer to a ridiculous degree. So let's say controller.cameras is controller.settings cameras. Like, what is even that? Like settings X. What is that? Come on, it's X. It's an editor. And what is that? Like, okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We will melt as much stuff as possible. We will do the melting, the meltment. Melt nation. And I hope that you will like when the dust settles. A lot of the point of this is, excuse me, for you to see. You might not like it, but to see the shape of my heart. No, the shape of the program. And to experience the difference in the way that the structure of the state, in, you know, just how it feels and how it allows you, in my opinion, to, you know, it's just a much simpler mental model of the actual program. This might be a problem. Because the way that this is tangent, but the way that the immediate mode user interface works, HG is hard GUI. That's DirectX rendered immediate mode user interface. It's used everywhere. To do drop combo boxes, drop lists, it needs a piece of context from the just a blind data. So it's a void pointer context for the for it to know if it's open or closed, right? It's an internal detail. Watch Casey Muratori's original talk. But anyway, I might be getting into trouble because I was previously passing that object, or the struct, the settings thing. And we'll see, but it doesn't look like I'm using, using that data in more than one place, so I can just go up in the hierarchy. So it's this whole controller. So this basically means, is it open? That's how it works. Is this drop list open? The drop list is generated here. A button, it's a toggle, right? And then I don't even remember, what is this editor? We'll look at that later. But I'm hoping that this is correct from a logical point of view, because what you end up needing is if you have multiple things that are, the idea is that you're only having one drop list open at a time. That's part of the realization in GUI. You only have, you're only reasonably interacting with one thing at a time. So there's no point in having more than one drop list open at a single time. When you want to differentiate between drop lists and doing user interface stuff based on what drop list is open, you need to be consistent about how are you from the app side identifying the various drop lists logically, because there are no drop lists, there are no objects that stick around. That's part of the immediate mode user interface stuff. So you need to have a piece of state, and again, it's just a blind thing. It can be like a number or whatever. You can it doesn't matter what it is, but it has to be something unique to identify, oh, it's this list or that list, and that's completely up to you. Yeah, so there's a bunch of this kind of stuff. Getting kind of confused, but yeah. Let's do this. I'm toggling a Boolean. That's the new style. So in all cases, I've flattened the hierarchy now. So the settings thing is gone, and all the member variables from that is in the enclosing structure, which is the meta controller, which will be melted as well, but one thing at a time. So now all this stuff is it's in a bunch of editors, and that's also typical for Normware stuff, is that there are there tend to be in most projects there tend to be multiple deployments. One that is the shipping one, the retail one, or public one, whatever you want to call it, and one which is dev. And dev is usually a superset does everything that the public deployment does, so it is the game, but it's also a bunch of bespoke editors that are built around the game. In this case, ZFighter, this code base, there is no such deployment split up. There's just the dev version, but that would be a fun refactoring to get rid of all of that. And why is it fun? It would be fun to see how minimal the game is, and also in terms of mutable, immutable, like what needs to be mutated at all, and what is just, like some stuff could probably be like code generated. Like a lot of the stuff that anything that's not like a waveform or a texture or things like that are reasonable to have as files on disk, like Targa files in most cases for my textures. The reason to have them as files on disk is because you're generating them in external programs like Photoshop or whatever, or ZBrush, and it's just it's a transport format to get them to and from the tool and the game, or from the tool to the game. So really, unidirectional passing of data. But in a lot of cases, and that's been part of my very long journey about thinking about persistence and editors and all that kind of thing. There are in many cases, in my experience in game development, a lot of needs for building bespoke editors and thinking about where does the data come from, what is the source of the data. In many cases, you're building or you're editing data which comes sort of from the application itself or from the dev version of the application where the editors are integrated. It could also be your own bespoke editors, but then it's more like logically the same case as, it's Photoshop. It could be Photoshop, or in my case, the SVERD. It's an external application that generates some kind of file that the game consumes in some way, many times through importers and transformations as such. And in those cases, you have much more flexibility about how that data actually gets used by the final application. So there are a lot of arguments that could be made for why don't you just generate a bunch of constants, make it literally constants. So maybe in the editor you're working with editing stuff, but in the public deployment it's actually just baked into the code. So I'm thinking that this was the drop down talking about, right? Let's look specifically at that code. If I can even find it. Combo. I think we're called, let's look, drop list. Here, editor, let's see, make sure that, this is where we're passing through this. This is the place settings, a couple of these editors here, and that's really bad, you can't see that stuff. So this red-green button here, that is this call, toggle. So what this means is that if this returns true if the toggle is pressed, and then I will toggle the drop list. And then here's the code that actually draws the drop list. If the drop list is active, now it's not, so we're breaking there. It's not active, now it is active, right? Because I said toggle the state of this context, this thing, this identifier, basically that's an identifier. Toggle the control drop list, and because this is the meta controller, you got to be careful. If I'm using that to identify another drop list, then both of them will toggle, logically, right? Because I'm just looking at a single. This means that there can only be a single drop list active. It should be called drop list active A, I suppose. But there's nothing. That's what's cool about immediate mode. Immediate mode GUI or in GUI is that it's not a drop list. It's just a thing that is on or off. That is it's basically it's just a utility inside the UI. There's a map from void pointers to are they on or are they off. You could argue that you could put that just as well put that in the application itself, right? Because in the case of a toggle, here again, what is a toggle? A toggle is like a radio button. It's on or it's off. The state of that radio button is actually being explicitly passed in here, so that's not stored inside the UI. Maybe that's a sign of refactoring, that the whole drop list thing. This variable in itself, you could put that on. You could do that on the app side. Maybe I'll have to look into if there is anything inside that is dependent. But anyway, and then once you're in here and you're actually doing a list, it doesn't just have to be like a standard component. Oh, what is it? Combo box. It has an editing field, or it has a selection box, and then when you open it, it has all this stuff. In this case, it's just a bunch of radio buttons, but it could be a radio button and a palette and a list of stuff and another combo box inside of a combo box. That's what you got to let go of as well when you're doing immediate mode stuff. The paradigms of all the widget types is sort of get melted into not a lot of stuff. There's generally like buttons, like these are buttons, the blue ones, and these are all radio buttons, which are conceptually the exact same thing as these toggles. But it's just that's just aesthetics. That's just styles. They're basically, you can put, what is an immediate mode UI do? It has buttons and it has like texts. Basically, that's basically all you need. And how do you do lists? You do lists like this. You do lists manually, because that's maybe not get too deep into GUI because it is a deep subject, and it does mess with your head if you're used to retain mode UIs, which seem to still be prevalent in the world. So maybe another video about that, specifically about immediate mode GUI. That would be probably a good idea. Gonna commit here, I think, because it ran. It's always good to remember to commit. So yeah, melting the meta controller. We got rid of play settings. Stuff got inlined. I am recording. I am recording. Sorry, I'm still very new at this. Next one, sector controller. What is that? Yeah, it doesn't have a constructor. Yay. So the sector controller, this is like the boxes and boxes thing. The sector controller is an editor. Let's show it. Let's be a little bit more clear. Again, to reiterate, the meta controller is the controller of controllers, and you can see that here. Basically, these buttons here. There's a play controller, there's a sector controller. Look at that. Search and replace. Animation controller, environment controller, and unsharp, which is completely broken. Some sort of unsharp mask idea. But this is like this play controller and this code path is what the game would ship. This part of it. So you're playing. So that's the play the game. Sector controller, it's all 2D. It's how you edit the game. So we started here, we're running that way. There's, you might recognize, I'm sorry, you might recognize, we're starting here, and there was those two bridges there and a bridge there. So I guess you could recognize that. Yes, we're starting here and going there, off to the void there. So the meta controller has many controllers, and then inside the controllers, in this case, there's a bunch of tools. So you want to edit the world, so you can draw stuff out. Like for example, we can make a window, or around. We can edit so it's open around the start point, so you can fall down and kill yourself. And for that to stick, we need to actually rebuild the world mesh because that's cached. And maybe I need to make that a little bit more pretty. So that's the thing. The sector is a level, basically, right? You can edit all this stuff, and there's where's the entrance, where's the exit, and what is the direction. So these different tools have, in this case, it's a little palette you can pick. You can also pick here, pick whatever you want. You can pick here. I think, yes, you can. In the entrance exit tool, you decide where's the entrance, where's the exit. Look at that. 1 is place entrance, 2 is place exit. Look, it's really horrible layout. And then you can choose, in the case of the entrance, what is the direction of it, right? Entities is, you can put out all the monster spawners and such. Animations, you can actually choose from all these animations down here to put them on the walls and stuff. Group is for, I don't know, is that for, I don't know, there's some sort of very, very, very simple scripting patterns for shooting guns or whatever in different patterns, and there's a pattern editor for that. And there are events which are basically you go into this green trigger and it spawns these guys, and whatever. But this is what we're refactoring. So the idea is that the sector controller gets put into the meta controller member-wise, and we stop talking about the sector controller as such. And what's interesting about this kind of refactoring is the sector controller previously would have been a class with all its own members and member functions specifically, right? So because if you look at the high level, when we're doing an input pass for the whole program, this is typical here. Like, depending on what controller is active, which is just, piece of state, we just branch here. This is the dispatch. This is what otherwise would be controller do input, and doing it with virtual function tables. So that's all that is. So in the interest of flatulating, we're just going to say that there is no longer a sector controller struct. There is only the required state member variables prefixed in the meta controller. So you say, oh, this is all the state you need for the settings thing, and that probably needs to be flattened again because there are like editors and editors, and that happens a lot. And again, like I showed you, sector is a controller, but it has tools. Like, what's the current tool, right? And it becomes logically hierarchical, right? And certainly you gotta have your poo together to be able to understand it. But what I found is flattening it all out and just prefixing it, it doesn't have any significant downsides to it. It doesn't make it more complicated to code. And what it also gives you is massively simplified programming when you have cross-cutting concerns, which you tend to have. Like, that's the thing. You do tend to have cross-cutting concerns, and that's where doing a divide and conquer it gets really bad, because then you have to start reaching into coordinating between two classes. Like, when you're in this state, I need to be in this state, and there are dependencies that you try to ignore that those dependencies are there. When you just have this big blob of mutable state, you just yes, I'm embracing the fact that in programming there are often many cross-cutting concerns, and you just accept that, and that's the point of having the code set up this way. It's just it's so much easier to just deal with that stuff and embrace the fact that your program is, on a conceptual level, what's complicated in your program is the amount of mutable state you have. Not the size of it in terms of memory, but the amount of moving parts. And let's look at it. This has a lot of moving parts, and in my experience, it helps a lot to be able to see that. Because the goal is, when I melt all of this stuff down, is to see just this flat view of this is all of the state that is mutable, and if I can just be able to glance at that and look at that, and in some cases see where's the redundancies. If there might be redundancies. There might be, you could, in many cases, probably argue that you could unionize a lot of this stuff, because you're only looking at, for example, one controller at a time, and there might be stuff there that you could, that's not a general rule, but my point is, you might be seeing that there are redundancies, that there's a camera that is basically common for all of them, and you had duplicated it because you weren't thinking about it. You were thinking about, I'm making a controller, I'm making a single class, I'm looking at that state in a typical object-oriented divide and conquer manner. There tend to be a lot of opportunities for reuse. And then you get into these really cool things you want to be you're flying around in one mode, and then you want to reuse that camera for another mode. You don't have to be copying state between cameras. It's there is only one camera, and it lets you think about cross-cutting concerns. It lets you think about a lot of opportunities for making things extremely user-friendly from an editor standpoint. We'll see if anything like that manifests. Maybe I should be searching and replacing a little bit more here, but this is a very comfortable mindset for me. This whole, I'm just not thinking about it. I'm just reading the compiler output. This, obviously, look at that. It used to be polymorphic dispatch, and now it's not. So that's the difference, And, proponents of design patterns, and especially the state pattern, will say that this is exactly what we're trying to avoid, and I'm saying no. I mean, I agree with Richicki that switch statements they do complex stuff, and cross-cutting concerns is complecting and stuff. But it's not. I would argue strongly that that's inherent complexity in your program, aka not your fault. And I would just rather embrace that. Here's some vestigial I-event target stuff. No longer used. Forget about it. Forget you ever saw that. There are a lot of casts going on from constant or immutable to mutable, and that's because conceptually I'm saying that the im-world. Oh, look at that! Doesn't. Oh wait, there's the utility function returns a constant. I'm editing stuff that is conceptually immutable. It's immutable from the standpoint of when we're in runtime or playing the game. Then all this stuff is immutable. But that's the slippery slope here. We're in editor mode now. Conceptually, we're exposed to a much larger surface area of mutable state, because otherwise, what's the point of an editor? You're editing something. But there are a lot of decisions to be made there. It's like I'm ultimately thinking of what's coming out. I'm ultimately thinking of the game that the user is going to play, and optimizing for that case. And look at that. Apparently, that got persisted. There's probably code somewhere when I switched from edit mode to play mode. I persist. So let's fix that. I didn't want that. I wanted that. Yeah, that's probably the little hiccup there. Let's see if it rebuilds. So what I'm suspecting now is because the cache of the wall meshes that get built, the cache file gets compared to probably a Jenkins hash of the entire sector. Yeah. So cache miss, it just implicitly rebuilds the whole mesh. Probably be a little bit more verbose about that. Yeah. So now we're back. So yeah, melted the sector controller. Next one is, I suppose, those have already been melted. This is a mouse look, sort of fly around, do mouse looking. This is just just that. But I'm thinking there are still stuffses that could be flattened. Camera pack. Yeah, cameras. What is that? What are those? They're all this stuff here that I've implemented, because of, I guess you could say, the tendency to defer design and say, no, I'll just make an engine that allows me to do anything I want. That means you don't want to make decisions. It comes from the desire to avoid making decisions. So you make a lot of stuff. Apparently, shift is look at the blur, the glow stuff, and control is to turn that off. So, and I'm also using that for accelerating the camera. But this is one of the cameras that are in that camera pack, right? So you can fly around, look at the entirety of the map. Again, two-dimensional faked horizon line should be fixed. There's our little dude. Yeah. And there are other cameras. There's apparently a fixed camera. Yeah, and that camera does not. What's the difference here? Collide camera. It moves. It collides against the walls, so it does, stuff like that. Fixed camera, I believe, is like doesn't collide against the walls. You have these problems, but it also gives you that sort of strafey gameplay. Yeah, and it sort of snaps to grid, it echoes the inspiration to this project, which is an old arcade game called Cybots, which was not done in 3D. It looked like it was 3D, but it was done with old school 8-bit technology or 16-bit or whatever. But it would do this. It would, like, you can run around in your grid, look at the performance, and it won't. This is a version of that. But forward, back, it'll scroll smoothly. Side to side, it will quantize. Yeah. But it's similar to the Collide camera, which is Get away from these guys. First person mouse look camera. Yeah. If the game should be done that way. Like, I'm so small. And obviously this is so Tron, inspired by Tron. First person camera is you're using the other controls, so it's kind of weird. You can't turn, and it has some really weird rolling. Third person camera, yeah, one of them. So you're like way. Yeah, you see the guy. He's down there. More high up, sort of top-down shooter sort of style camera. And this is like Collide camera, but without the collision. So that's what all that stuff is. And that stuff appears in code here as the camera pack. Let's see what the constructor does. Let's go over here. Yep. So that's because there's some constructors going on there. We need to do that. And let's see how this goes. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff here. Current camera. Those are all the cameras. So we're going to call it just camera. And look at that, we might. Maybe I should do that later. There's a little bit of redundancy there. Let's see how this goes. And probably want to get rid of the struct in forward declarations because it's gone. Yeah. And then you start getting into the compiler errors. I have a meeting pretty soon, but let's go fast. So it's going to be in the meta controller T is where the camera stuff is. Now more, as we say in Swedish. Numera, it means henceforth, I guess, or more like from a certain point on, I guess you could say. Now more, yeah, henceforth, now more. It's good in Swedish, yeah. Now more, this lives here, yeah. Now and moreover, I don't know. Stop talking about Swinglish. And here's an interesting one. Here's another drop list that depends on if this drop list is open, this is all about the camera drop list. So I need a way to identify that, which is, before I use the camera pack. An error would be to do that, to use controller, because then let's do that just to begin with and see what happens. I think that's a good way to exemplify the drop lists in media mode UI, and see how you can make yourself away and make a fool of yourself. Make yourself away, as we say. Actually, I'm not the only one, obviously, who enjoys Swinglish. My ex-girlfriend, actually, she told me at one point that when she was in high school, they had like an event. It was called Make Yourself Away Day, and it was just a fun thing, dress up and make a fool of yourself day, basically. But I like the fact that they use the Swinglish and they use the rhyme, make yourself away day. I thought that was funny. Maybe I should, controller. Maybe I should search and replace this stuff in the whole project. If I could do that again, I will. Controller. So yeah, we're seeing camera collide camera. That will be refactored. We're going to see if we can use Visual Studio's built-in refactoring tools for that. Sometimes I'm leery of trusting them because, any refactoring tool that will say, oh, I'm going to give you suggestions on what I think you meant, then I get super nervous. But if it goes through without showing me that pop-up dialog and says just, yeah, I know what you meant, I can do it all through, then I like to use it. Settings, cameras, current. Now this is me confusing myself. Let's see. Settings, cameras is not a member. Right, that's what I'm getting rid of. So it's camera current. Now look at that. That seems camera, third person camera. So yeah, look at that. Getting rid of a dereference means that we're flattening hierarchies and in my mind simplifying. So let's do controller camera. See how that works. Yeah, controller. So you, in my mind, it's sort of like you think that kind of amazingly aggressive refactoring, like you're taking a struct that was in another struct and you're just flattening it out, that you'd get more compiler errors and you get more like a mess of trying to figure it out. But it's interesting. Like there's a lot of replace patterns, but it's really not that bad. So yeah, so go through my cameras. And yeah. So that one worked. That's so hard to type. Procrastifacting. Better get ready for a meeting soon, but maybe we could do one more. Let's try to do one more. So yeah, maybe you could say, oh, look at that, it's terrible. You have to use a 91% zoom on an 8-point font to begin with, right? To be able to see all of the state. But that's my point. It's like, this is the state that you have introduced in your program. This is all of the stuff that is actually mutable and that you're dealing with. and you need to know about that stuff. You simply need to know it, because that is what is the incidental. Hopefully it's incidental complexity, but this is the only way you're ever going to have a chance, a prayer to figure out if you have introduced. In, sorry, I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say, you need to be able to see if you have introduced incidental complexity, or if it's all inherent, and you're trying to melt this down, in really it's the case that if you could shave off just like, if I can get rid of that, then I've like massively reduced the potential state space of my program. If you think about, that's an 8-bit value, and potentially the program, let's assume that's an 8-bit value, and I'm not going to get rid of it, but I might be able to. 8-bit value that, if it's there, if it's not there, then you have a certain number of bits in your state space. But if you put it in there, then you have that previous number times 256. Like, it seems innocuous, but it's not. It's really not. So the point is, flattening everything out like this and having to deal with the fact that you're looking at a huge surface area, I think that's very, very, very important. And it's like, this is what we're actually dealing with. This is what programming is. Divide and conquer gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling, because it's like, oh no, it's not as bad as you're like saying. No, it's not. The inherent complexity isn't as bad as all this, but you're just hiding it from yourself and from everyone else, and it's all about just bucking up and dealing with it. That's really what it is. Yeah, this is apparently reused. So yeah, all this stuff, the different third-person cameras, and apparently there was one here for the environment camera too. Those are all configured differently. It might be the case that those are, look at that, they're constant. I have a couple of minutes here. Yeah, like 4 minutes. But let's get through that one. They're constant. They are not mutable state. I love it. And maybe also the environment camera. Cool. Look at that. Goes away. And it's going to be like, that's 4 declarations. Here is a camera structure. And we're going to say those things are no longer state. I love it. They're not state. They're constants. And apparently that is used in other places. So yeah, we're going to say that it is part of work, I suppose. Let's put it in constants, because, just to delineate that it's a thing that's thrown around, but it's not part of state. It's just like when it gets used, it's constant. Right, so how are we going to deal with this? Used all over the place in code, so we need like a global constant here, and we can do that because we can look at camera third person and camera environment, and we can put them again in constants. Put them at the bottom. TP camera T. Let's just do that. And I want to refactor the names later. But all of these things now used to be state. Constants. Now we're saying that they are external constant structures. And we're just prefixing them because of the namespace thing. And someone is calling me. I'll have to continue this later. Hold the thought. Right. So back to where we were. See if this is going to work. So these, the thought was that these were supposed to be constants. Apparently not. Great, look at that. Man. To begin with, this should be a pure function. So let's do that. Like getting confused. Right? And the heading, yeah, so so in heading, and then return float. To hero heading. And utility thing to interpolate the current heading of the camera to what the hero thing is. Yep, cool. That'll kick us in the butt later. So hopefully, in most of these cases, we just want to use these things as constants. So because there's a lot of stuff in these things. In the third person, where did I put it? I put it in the constants, right? Yeah, this thing. I think height, offset, pitch are immutable, and this is sadly not. So we're going to see if in this case we can get away with, like I was talking about before, maybe there is a lot of redundant state here because you're only using a single camera at a time, and maybe we could pull out the heading because there's a heading for that camera, there's a heading for that camera, a heading for that camera. Maybe we could just use a current camera heading that is shared, and because we're not reasonably switching between cameras. This is just a dev feature. We're not switching between cameras at runtime, so we could probably get away with that. And the reason is to get this from being a typically object-oriented thing where some of the stuff is constant and other stuff is not. So we'll see how that goes. But first of all, yeah, and you get into situations like this, like, wow, look at that. We're not even using that anymore. So getting rid of dependencies. I'm thinking that this is probably forwarded somehow, right? So controller. This isn't gonna hold, but especially if we're reading the heading there, the heading's probably gonna be pulled out. Yep. This is where we're actually, look at that opportunity. All these cases we're resetting the heading, or resetting the camera, the current camera. They all have their own heading state, but I'm suspecting that we can actually get away with one common one. Yep. So let's do that. Looks like we're going to have to do that. Constants doesn't have a heading. That heading for the camera current, we're going to say camera heading. And get rid of heading first person camera. Yeah, that one has that heading, has that 90-degree orientation thing. This one doesn't because that's just not applicable, So no, fine. This one does have it. This one does have it. Yep. So basically, they're all going to share the same piece of state. I end up going to do it this way. Camera make result heading. Does it even read the camera coming in? Make yeah. This shouldn't be called camera. It's confusing me and everyone else probably. This is like render setup, blah, blah, blah. But maybe let's do a fix me, rename this to VC render or VC render setup T or something. It's not a persistent camera. Confusing the issue, the nomenclature. But that's interesting. TP camera make, we need a heading. So we need to pass a heading because it needs to, otherwise we are not initializing this thing. So we'll see how that goes. Target position. So we end up in a situation where that state is slightly exploded. At least in terms, it's not self-contained inside this because this is a constant setup. And we should probably call this something else, like camera. Let's do that. I mean, this is doing several things at the same time. It might be a bad idea, but we'll call it third person camera settings. So we know that it's just and this needs to be third person camera settings T. And we'll call it settings. Yep, so that is now the common state, which is controller camera heading. You know, we could be super clear about this. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Common heading, we'll call it that. And we'll make a note, shared among all the cameras that need heading state. Not first person / mouse look. That's interesting. Yeah. Now it starts. Yeah. This will be better later when the meta controller is part of VC mutable, but right now it's going to be bad. So bear with me. Let's see if we can do a constant meta controller T controller. And make a rotation from controller common camera common head. And look at that. Isn't that nice? That in all of these cases, we're doing the same thing. That's interesting. Yeah, that's reasonable because what these values of the current camera do is just make it look at different constants globally. So there's a mapping between, oh, I'm in this camera mode, and then I know implicitly, what constant I'm looking at. Hopefully that's clear. First person camera common. It's always that. Yep. And controller camera common. So yeah, here's what I was thinking. So there's this. This means use this constant. This means use that constant. Blah blah blah. Implicitly. But that's one of the things, like that's why I like the switches in this case, because that's pretty complicated. Like in the cases of these cameras, they need to have a constant that they can pass, and you would think, can we just use a pointer to a constant, like a pack of settings? But in the other cases, it's like that's where the polymorphism comes in, and I think you would end up in a situation, the typical situation is you have some sort of do the camera stuff function that is virtual, but then you end up passing the union of all the function arguments that thing needs to handle all the subclasses, and that's where I feel it just really conceptually falls apart. And also, you find that if you're running warning level 4, where unused arguments are errors, then you see that it really does fall apart, because but this isn't a common interface, because the subclasses or the types as they're actually significantly different from each other to be able to support that in any nice way. So that's why I like the switching better. It's like you're trying to make an abstraction that is not really, you're trying to force an abstraction. It just doesn't hold. So again, same thing in 3 cases. 4 cases even, looks like, right? Same thing. More than that. Being super careful here. Okay, so environment to output meta. I broke it! So it looks like the input is correct, yeah, but the output is not. And I'm in play. Where does it get the camera? It's a little bit aggressive, maybe. Third person make camera, glide camera setup. Contact. Yeah, so somehow the actual setup doesn't properly use that state. And I want to be in third person. Yeah. Let's look for this. Where is this? It probably did way too big of a refactoring because now I'm totally off kilter. Like I don't even know what I did. I was just like assuming that it would be fine. Glide camera setup, yeah. So I guess it's the interpolation I would suspect. Let's see if I can manage to to deal with this. That's why it's procrastifacting, because it's so much simpler. I'm trying to change the structure of the code, but I'm not trying to think about programming problems, really. I'm just, it's a different hat. And yeah, that's the thing. Lerp to hero heading. So this is what I'm lerping. Yeah, no, that's the thing. But, yeah. Let's look for all the. I made it into a pure function. So I want to do that. These things are constants, so I'm taking that and then reassigning it back, right? And that, that's just pure functions style. So I was not writing the result of that interpolation back to the variable. A little bit quite typical. Too many refactorings at once. Just there's something I like. There's something I like about that's sort of what Zybots felt like. But it's a bit jerky, I suppose. But it would be cool to do a fixed camera in both axes, because I like that. You're running around locally in this little space. That's kind of cool. And then yeah, I want to do that. Let's do that. Like make a new feature. But I'm glad I could show you an example there of actually doing a refactoring, introducing a bug, and actually fixing it without just going, oh, I want to think about it, and reverting everything, because that's what I generally tend to do. and I'll probably save myself some time there. Procrastifacting. But that's also indicative. It's like, that's why I call it procrastifacting, because it's a much more pleasant mind space, or sort of brain mode to be in, as opposed to actually implementing new features or fixing bugs or that kind of thing. Hopefully, I'll get to show you all different modes.
Apologize, I'm learning OBS, as I said. This should sound better because I'm using an actual microphone, like a good microphone, SM58, instead of the webcam, which sounded crapalicious. This lighting is work in progress as well. Like how much shine do you want and how pink do you want to be? I'm looking quite pink, I think. Anyway, I think post the previous refactoring, some things need to be made a little bit clearer. And I'm thinking these should probably be uppercase, because that's like, as people do that, it's like a standard. If something's constant, it's uppercase. That is, and let's call it, let's call them more reasonable things. VC camera environment. And I'm gonna try to be nice to myself. VC camera environment. 2 occurrences replaced. Now I'm being stupid. VC camera third person 2. 1 occurrence. Yeah, because obviously those settings are only for actually updating the camera, and then when yeah, play settings camera. That's interesting to me when it's doing, just confusing me, because why is that only referenced in one place? You'd think that and this is when it's actually rendering. Yeah, that's true. The actual like the update of the interpolation and yada yada yada. This third person camera is actually only thinking about interpolating that heading, and then that heading is obviously used here when you're making the render settings. I need to rename that as well, but it doesn't need those other things. It doesn't need the height, the offset, and the pitch to actually do the input stuff, or anything that has anything to do with pressing forward will make you walk in a certain direction. That's only part of the heading. So that's kind of cool. That means for third-person cameras, we can do this. We can completely get rid of, probably in all cases, yeah, we can just localize all those constants. So let's see how that goes. Camera environment. We can just do this. Just goes away. So third person 1, 2, and 3. You could probably just inline them. Look at that. And let's not do that yet. But that's pretty awesome that now even like the number of constants you have to be aware of are just like completely the surface, again, surface area. So where are we now? We're just look at the files. We're in a couple of different CPPs. So there is a reason to keep this constant or this structure in a common header. But I like that. I like that. Okay, so continuing on with metacontroller compactification. Last time we got the whole camera pack into here. Next one, I would say play editor. Oh, that's just a switch. But the state for yeah. That's kind of a pain because here's the main switch. It's like what controller of all the controllers are we using? But also this thing is the play editor, right? And I'm thinking play editor. And we're going to call it play editor because it's only used when there's no state for it. But when you're in play mode, well, this is the state for it. State for play mode or play controller, so to speak. Controller. So this is like boxes and boxes. It's you're in play, or you're in the meta controller, and then you choose play, and then in there you choose what other editor you're showing. And I think the reason for that is because those want to piggyback on the visualization of the play mode. So you're editing, I don't know what these are. I know that the patterns editor is for editing because there are certain things that use, for example, there are like projectiles that come out of the walls in a certain sequenced pattern. Some of this stuff is probably super deprecated. But anyway, that's why this isn't like a controller, because controllers, they need to, well, conceptually they're in charge of routing input and also painting a picture. Whereas this is like an overlay, so to speak. I guess you could call it that. We might call it overlay. You know, let's do that. Let's just do that. Play overlay. Oh, for that. And so it's an IMGUI sort of thing, but doesn't really necessarily have any output responsibilities in terms of painting painting a whole 3D view. Play overlay. And here I like to use Yoda. I know, like, you could probably get the compiler to find that for you. Yeah, well, sure, yeah. But I'm thinking, did you mean to do that? Yeah. What? Anyway, so you don't do that mistake. Maybe it's just overly stringent, but I just do that. Constant equals variable. Yeah. So now I'm going to go on a whole crazy tangent of that, probably. Settings editor is now play overlay. Yeah. I hope I'm not capturing audio anymore. I'm experimenting with that. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. We'll see. But anyway, the play overlay is this. And there, yeah, that's what I wanted to show you before. Why are two different drop-downs opening at the same time? That's because I'm using the same application state as an identifier. So let's fix that. Let's fix that in a nice way. So this looks for drop list. So the camera drop list, it's using controller. I think that's probably bad. Use the current camera instead. And immediately they're separated. But I want to know what the other one is using. It's using the controller. So it's what is the... And that's overlay. Hey, that's kind of cool. Like I'm seeing, how does it know? That's cool. It highlights the \n in a slightly different color. That's nice. I like that. And we'll call that overlay GUI. How do you say that in English? GUI, GUI, UI, GUI. That's hard to say. GUI. It's easier in Norwegian. So that was just how it works. You're switching on, you're identifying, is it open or not based on some sort of application state, and you have to be smart. You could, if you wanted to, you know, for some reason they all open based on the same thing. I don't know why you would ever do that, but maybe that's a feature you want. You don't really need to constrain yourself to classic widgets. Procrastifacting. It's still so hard to write. Okay, we're still going here. Right. So that's just the current one. So that's the simple, and then Xworld editor, part, rotation, flags. Right. That editor has something to do with overlay Xworld, with setting up how this is a time. This is a time where you want to see what you actually did. Okay, wiped it and then set the flags to that. Okay, cool. So the Wang tile, two-corner Wang tiles. Need to be, because they're built in. Let's look at that. That'll be fun. Wings. This is a legacy program I used. We are loading. Let's see what we're loading. I think it's called Meku. Yeah, these are the parts. So let's look at the parts. File. This is really weird. This is actually written in Erlang. The Swedish Ericsson, they made up a weird language. I think I don't know if it's Lispy, but it has some interesting sort of immutable message passing, principle stuff. This is the one. Yeah. So you can see, for example, the walls. Let's turn off everything that's not walls. Yeah. Walls, like this is the side piece here. So for, straight sides, this is like the convex corner, and this is the concave corner, and this is when the corner that meets between two. So this is like the required subset of the corner wang tiles that are required, because you can obviously rotate them. Maybe a little bit easier to see if we just look at the floors, because floor has the filled case. Maybe, yeah, I was just confused by scale. So this is the filled case, like the whole floor, and this is an edge. This is an edge, this is an edge, and that kind of stuff. It all works that way. So the pits are the same. They're the parts going down into and then the walls, and then there's a cover piece apparently too for, I don't know if that's used anywhere, like just a box to hide behind. Yeah, so these are, why am I showing that? Because, yeah, there's an editor, because these are I just built them in a way that was convenient in this program, but the origin is there. So many of these are offset from the origin. And in order to be able to rotate them, obviously they need to be around the origin. So instead of doing it here and making it harder on myself here, I made an editor in the game where you could adjust all those things. So here, in this case, we have to go at a Control T, because that's the whole point. Yep. So this is the Xworld editor part. So I'm saying controller overlay Xworld flags is what it is. I guess the flags mean you could you could turn them on or off. You can build with or without them. The various parts, the walls, the floors, and the pits. So this is controller Xworld part. Controller Xworld rotation. And I'm not going to show the effects of all this, but because you have to rebuild the whole mesh each time you change something, Control X World flags. Maybe I should start search and replacing this stuff. Controller overlay X World flags. Xworld do input. So yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, you're doing, and it shouldn't be called that. It should be called that's play overlay. That's what we said it was called. And let's just bite. Let's do this. Let's try refactoring here. Current project, skip preview, change of reference are all confirmed. Overlay, apply. No, and it couldn't do it. So, bleh, I don't like that. I could probably make it work, but I'd rather just search and replace it. Interesting to see if these pop-ups are going to show in OBS, because I've noticed that sometimes some of the pop-up dialogues don't show, and I'm just typing and you can't see what I'm doing. I think that's kind of sad. And also, focus is getting messed up, so you can't just escape out of it. a little bit of a pain because I can't really find any consistency in that. Yep, and last one. It's easy play, overlay, render hero. And probably got some bad stuff going on because of the change the include, play over. I'm not gonna try to optimize away unneeded includes. I'm just gonna try to go with it. Yep. Overlay X world flags. Overlay X world. Yeah, here are all the things. You know, turn on. Oh, apparently when I click it, it rebuilds the whole world. Okay, so now you're gonna see it anyway. Yeah, so now I'm building without the world. Or sorry, without the walls, but the floors are still there and the hits are still there. Yeah. For some reason, probably debugging purposes. That's also interesting. Like when the drop list is down, it's not showing the current editor. That's cool. No editor. Next world. Patterns. Yeah, there's the patterns. So it's like a sequencer. You can do some cool stuff there. So let's look at something that. Yeah, many uses for that. Materials, I don't know what that's for. Maybe there's some idea changing the anyhow. I want the walls to be off because it'll catch this. So might as well wait for it now. So that worked. Inline the X world overlay. I'm looking at this and I'm not liking it at all. No, I'm going to let that one go because you're probably going to be bit masking and fianting about. Let's try this. Static assert for equals size of. But, yeah, so it's 32 bits anyway. It's fine. It is fine. But I'm not liking the patterns editor. I'm not liking the constructor. That goes into meta controller constructor. Is there a way to find that? You see meta. Yep. And we're just going to do that. Overlay patterns. Overlay patterns. Get rid of the struct, so it's a meta controller T controller overlay is the prefix we want. We see meta controller T controller and controller overlay patterns and patterns. Controller. Yeah, I'm sure that one is completely fine. Well, we're gonna look at it. Items. All right. Commit. Procrastifacting. And hopefully the last one. Image files in that thing. Okay. We're gonna go inline that. Ooh, dynamically allocated dynamic length strings. Do not liking, but I'm not going to mess with it. It's probably completely abandonware. Right. Constructor, go away, please. What's it called? Settings, material. Like that. Like data. Does it even have, it doesn't have a day structure. Okay, you can keep it. One day I'm going to decide what to do with this project. Mm-hmm. Not called? Yes, called. La 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 tonight. La 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 tonight. So impatient. Controller, overlay material. Okay. It doesn't catch it. That's the thing. Even, you know, the IntelliSense, it sometimes doesn't catch, you know, follow-ups. So it's like, it would be really cool to be able, I haven't talked about that. It would be really cool to constrain the compiler to just quit on the first error. That, I think, would save a lot of dev time. Overlay material. Starting to be curious here. Should I just assume that worked? I think it did. Like sometimes I don't really. Yeah. Carrying so much. Yeah. It's fine. So cool. You know, it'd be really nice to get rid of that as a type. But sometimes it probably gets passed by reference. Constant. I'm thinking somebody wants to mutate it. Yeah, it's just, oh God, it's because I don't remember my macros. Like, is bit set bit, clear bit, yeah, that kind of stuff. I don't orc. I don't orc right now. I don't orc means I can't be bothered, or I don't have the energy, because orka in Swedish is to have the energy or to have the stamina to do something. So I don't orc. We say that a lot. It's probably time to eat also. Let's see what happens when I knock 12 dB off system sounds. See if we can get the volume of the game down a bit. Again, learning OBS. This one will be fun because I'm finally going to melt MetaController into mutable where it belongs. So this is a big chunk of crap with constructors and destructors, but it really belongs here. Yeah. Look at all this stuff. So what is the mutable state of the program, of the whole, or not of the program, of this? Again, model view controller split. Immutable part of the model, basically just a world. There's probably more stuff. Mutable part of the model, M prefix, right? And then there's the meta controller, apparently, which is the state of all the stuff we've been editing, all the editors and blah, blah, blah. And here's some other stuff. Like, what is that? I don't know. That's also conceptually immutable state. Assets, immutable post-load. And then here's all the, this is where it all should be, right? All the mutable state that is not the simulation or the model, but the stuff that has to do with, you know, what screen you're on, what menu you're on, like things that need to be tracked, like, for example, camera, state, yeah. It will become clear. But I'm not liking that this stuff is here. So that gets to go here. What's it called? It's just MU, okay. Oops. It's cool. And I'm thinking that should really, to be clear, because there's another MU there, we can call it, let's call it VCMU. Current project apply. Let's see what it's saying. Why can't it refactor? Preview changes, rename. Because not all references were confirmed, please preview changes as. And how many are there? Like tons. Inactive code references because of CTB. Well, let's say, okay, let's try it. Does it work? Yeah. That's cool. That's keeper. 3 Procrastifacting. Okay. So, yep. So basically ordered like that. This goes into, controller goes into this right here. Yeah. So what would that entail? It would mean, let's go to 100% zoom, all of this stuff goes into mutable. And this struct completely goes away. So to get ahead of that, VC meta controller T, look for all of those. All the forward declarations need to be removed because that thing just does not exist anymore. And we'll see what happens. So yeah, now it's all in there. So we're all just talking about the mu. The mu. Maybe it's called. Right, and the world, those things moved out. This becomes simply work, just algorithms. So it goes away there. So the point is very clean: immutable, mutable, and the rest is just algorithms. That was the goal of all of this crap. I need some stuff. Yep. So let's look at the naming of the stuff that we just dumped into mutable. It didn't, I just pasted it in, and obviously it doesn't, there aren't any name collisions. So that's kind of cool. It just worked, right? So you just get to do that. Let's see, controller dot is mu dot. Not, yeah, let's see if we can get around that. And of course, just the meta controller. So what's this? Play overlay. It uses undefined struct camera. So is that in camera? Yep. No meta controller. Mutable. Mutable. There we go. Is that in constants then? Constants. Oh, wow. Okay, I guess it's there. Play overlay this. Why is that the case? Well, probably, yeah, the camera pack stuff is here. Yeah. That's probably ridiculous. Should be here. Just some crap. Let's see, used refer. Yeah. Okay, let's see how that works. Shall not getting it. VC camera. That's where it is. Yeah. play overlay, double const. Is that like Double Fine? This is just like mindless following what the compiler is saying to me. And in general, that's the thing, you know, it's like I like to try to program in a way so I don't necessarily have to think so much. Is that reasonable to say? You know, look at this, direct. It has everything. Yeah, that's in the app. I think we can. Yeah, local direct also. All these things are in the app. So we can just do that. And do input. What is this? All this stuff is in the app. Oh, did I just make myself away? Maybe in a way I did. Just go do item takes the app anyway. Why does it do? What is the point of that? Okay. Animation item y app mutable app. I guess you could argue that the whole app, the app is, you know, just pass the app everywhere. And, you know, not necessarily a bad idea, but if you want to try to be constant on some stuff, do item takes what? Doesn't just take the app there. That's basically the menu system. It's very simple in this case. But yeah, a great example of that is Sanglard Doom 3. Doom 3 BFG code review. How they integrated Doom Classic. Talking about a game that had global variables in a lot of modules and yeah, global variables, local variables in the subsystems, so in the CPC files, right? And they wanted to make it split screen. So what they did was this. They put every single piece of state in a big pile, right, from all the subsystems. And then they just had global data and they pointed to whichever one of the four, and then they ran the code. So that that means that you have to touch all the code, all the references to the variables. But I think that's cool. It's interesting because then you know, like, this is all the state in the whole program. And you know, I don't like that it's globally accessible. I still like, you know, passing. For some reason, I do. Like, I think that's still a good idea to pass it on the call stack, you know. And a certain amount of split, you know. I think this is simulation stuff. I don't think that should be complected with assets or that, because these are, you know, you're able to categorize these quite stringently. Like, what is this? This is sectors, and like this is scripting. This could be called triggers, really. But this is the part that gets edited of the world, you know. And then the mutable part of the simulation is stuff like power bits and visiting tiles and the number generator and the hero and all of the, you know, bots, bullets, leeches, pickups, all that stuff that's mutable. it's very conceptually separatable, and I think that's nice. Again, assets, gone through that before. This is like textures and things you load. Visualization support really is what it is for a possible visualization. Again, that's one of the other things that I'm being stringent about, is like, here's the model, here is one possible visualization, and really, because I'm doing a lot of controllers, there's a lot of visualizations, but you could do another visualization of the whole program that doesn't even use any 3D assets or anything. It could just be like a console output or something like that, or using software bitmaps and making a top-down whatever. I think those kinds of splits are important. So that's why I'm doing it, and not just passing a big, here's everything, because it forces you to think about what's what. Do input takes just the app. But here inside app, it's like, if you're, yeah, here you basically want the split, because some of these things are constant, some are not. Immutable and mutable. A little bit of a pain. What is this code? This is, yeah, very typical local mode. If you're not in the menu, do some input stuff. Otherwise, yeah, do some demultiplexing of the meta control with all the this is probably play input, and this is like editors and stuff. And then you update the model, you do tick the simulation, and then you get a struct back, which is like basically an event list. And I should eat my magnesium. Magnesium. Yeah, and then straight up here in line, the way that this works is just a bunch of bit flags that say, oh, something happened, and then the data for that is in here most of the time. A typical design of something like this is that you have a queue, but I think in this, for some reason, I arrived at that only one of these can reasonably happen a tick. So it is sort of a queue, but it's like, oh, did any of these happen, and only one of them do. And maybe it's not true. Maybe I could put assertions in, like basically you put bits here in flags and say, okay, bullet hit happened, so there's a bit for that. And I guess you should check in the code really, was this bit set, and if it was, and you care about that, then you should make a queue. Otherwise, maybe it's okay that some of the events stomp on each other, but then you just read, did this happen, and then you just react. So that's very risky. That's making it so that this here doesn't need, when it's running, to do callbacks back to the visualization to say, oh, I need to be able to visualize some event. It's very formalized. And we can, if I remember, we can do a version that just, we'll do this. That turns off all of the visualization of events, which can be fun. Let's look at that later. Trying to get through this stuff. Let's see if we can be smart about it. Im world is app dot underscore im world. And mmu is app underscore mmu. What are we? Yeah. assets is app underscore assets, and mu is app underscore vcmu. Let's see if that got us through it. App underscore local direct just goes app. And direct is just app. And hopefully last one. What is this? VCMU, yeah. What does this do? A menu flag. Yeah, but you sort of know that, don't you? It is known. I got ahead of myself a little bit there. Yeah, okay, we'll keep going. Let's go controller dot is mu dot. VC mutable t mu. VC mutable t mu. Why is it not here? Like I did a search and replace. So painful. Controller dot. Just ripping it out. La 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 la. So painful. So, which means I'm gonna have to go through all of those probably as well. Oh, yeah, well, obviously. Ooh, look at that. So yeah, here's the constructor. It needs to get put into mutable. Does it have a constructor? It does. Mutable. And the destructor will now be mutables destructor. Like that. Like that. Doesn't like that. So yeah, in app, there was the menu flag is such. Camera, it doesn't know what camera is, and that was in camera. Yep. Yeah, it's all the same stuff there. Controller dot new dot. Play overlay. Should I be playing music now, you know, for there to be something in the background? You know, it's about the popcorn rating of this stuff. Is it watchable? Is it enjoyable? Because sometimes all this stuff, there's nothing to be said about this. It's just rote, follow the compiler and zen out, you know. And I guess by definition, I'm not really in social mode or, you know, talkative mode when I'm doing this stuff, because, you know, it's maybe that's why I do it. You know, when you don't want to deal with decision making or implementing something really, really difficult, then just do procrastifacting. And I guess, yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's really, it is an investment in the code base. It's an investment in, you know, thinking about, you know, immersing myself in a project that I'm not necessarily working on actively, thinking about what I could do with it, getting it up to speed, you know, more implementing some of my more modern ideas, you know. But that's also a slippery slope, because this is just me living in infinite possibility space, which is very comfortable, but it's not necessarily helping me ship stuff. So I do admit it's procrastifacting. Ancients of Moo Moo. Maybe I will edit this stuff out. It's really hard for me to know by this point, like, is this really epic stuff that I'm doing, or is it like completely trivial and mundane, and like everybody knows this and everyone is better than I am at this kind of stuff? But it's just, maybe it's, you know, artistically pleasing to see how small you can make it, because I'm certainly minimalistic, and I certainly like, you know, being able to move fast and rip and tear until it is done, and really be as agile as I can when it comes to trying stuff out in you know, in my code bases. And if I were to, jump on this project seriously and make it into something, or, with the intent of shipping something, I would totally be doing this kind of refactoring anyway, because I couldn't live with the, because that's the point of refactoring. You have to understand that the reason to spend time changing the structure of a program and retaining every single functionality might seem, from a business standpoint, completely like a waste of time. But it's an investment so that it's easier to mutate it later. So it's easy to work on it, and that, that's a discipline. And I think also, if you look at this up here, 223 projects, I'm maintaining all of that in a single solution, simply because I realized many years ago that because they're all using common code, if you have them split up in different solutions and like working just on like SBTF, for example, and then I change some common code, then I transparently break all the other stuff that is dependent on that common code. So it's a statement of principle. It's like, okay, if this code is common and you want to maintain the code that depends on it, then you better be basically running your tests. And that's the compiler for me. You have to make sure that all of the dependent projects change their call sites when something common changes. It's just and a lot of times people, like, I talk to people and they're like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm refactoring Astro Creeps Elite, and they're like, what? Why are you touching that code? You're not working on that game right now. No, but I'm amortizing the cost of the common code changes, and I've found, it might be counterintuitive, but I really found that once I decided to do that, in order to keep all my stuff, all my speculative, because it's still speculative, all these half finished projects, it really, counterintuitively to me, turned out making the quality of everything better, and it's really relatively trivial to lift stuff and move stuff between projects, and there's some sort of weird cross-pollination going on, which is good, which I like. So it's an interesting choice, and I found that I like it. I mean, the alternative is having some sort of semantic versioning system to all of your stuff, and that means like multiple repos or submodules or whatever, the constructs that Git, for example, has for that. And it seems to be adding another dimension to the problem. It becomes like 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, or whatever. And, it seems like flat is the way to go. It's just sort of an intuitive, I couldn't argue more than at a gut feeling level, but that's me in a nutshell. And it's just, it seems to be working quite well. And it's similar how I, recently, during the summer, I've been in this like morass of tons and tons of different branches. And that also becomes completely untenable. You think that, it isolates things and it makes you able to experiment and stuff. But then when you decide you want to merge something back or you want to cherry pick, it just becomes this awful thing. So, I mean, branches are fun and nice that they're free and everything, but merging will never be easy, Yeah, so it looks like that works. So what did we do? We got it all into mutable. I'm not liking that, but constants, you can depend on constants. Yeah, this is just what happens because the header of mutable was including constants, which conceptually is not correct. Not at a header level, but depending code, obviously. See if we can get, generally it's nice to be able to get rid of headers in headers, or includes in headers. Unless you're doing a Unity build, I suppose. I don't have any experience of that. With that. But I suppose in a Unity build you don't have headers, or not so much, not as much as this stuff does. Come on. Look at that. That's because hero was a class before, you know, and you had to include the header because that's where the struct was declared, or that class was declared, and it was part of mutable. So this style tends to quite significantly reduce headers in headers, or including headers in other headers. So let's see if we can get rid of that. Yeah. The problems are coming up in other CPPs, right? Because all that stuff is work stuff now. Maybe it should be called VC work. So you could see even clearly, like, you're not supposed to be including this in the header because it's just functions. I should have done this as a separate refactoring. Let's commit now, I think. Let's do it. Procrastifacting. So now I'm just forwarding instead. What? Does it not know? Apparently not. That's not true anymore. That namespace doesn't exist. Get into trouble. Now that one's probably valid because there is state here that is apparently not. Okay. Oh, come on, track it. Track active item. It's not tracking it. Cool. That one's probably, yep, we're including that. These you're including, and yeah, that looks better to me. And I think that's the end of the main push for the VC project in ZFighter. I got it to where I want it, where there's immutable stuff. Constants are certainly totally immutable. Assets are load time after post load, program startup load, they're immutable, except for some stuff like here. This changes per level, but I decided to put it in assets anyway, just to have fewer pieces to pass around, and that's fine in my mind because that is very isolated. When that happens, when those get mutated, like just that level load, and you really know when that's going on, so that's fine by me. Then mutable is like all the fancy schmancy stuff that you need for particle systems, render targets, blah blah blah. Things need to persist across many frame boundaries. Some stuff for visualization, you know, for headings, jumping, like light cycle stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here that's dev stuff. So I think that in the case of splitting this project up into a development version and a public deployment version, mutable will have to be split up again, and all the dev stuff gets ripped out again. Will be ripped out and separated out. So that is in a different project, but not for now. So yeah, just to exemplify. My point was to exemplify that this is the state that you're dealing with. Like, it might look like a lot because I'm having to scroll and using a small font and everything, but that's inherent complexity to what I'm doing. This is, and you know, thinking about it that way, like this is all the editors, this is all of the stuff, all of the particle systems, like everything is here. Then maybe it's not so bad, you know. I think perhaps some of these functions should be conceptually like moved out. That would be a nice refactoring to do. Let's commit and end this video. But anyway, just so that this becomes smaller, because it's kind of big now, like 600 lines of code. This should just be like the constructor basically. And it could be argued that should there be a constructor at all, or could you just like go and put that construction stuff into the app? But you know, you gotta stop somewhere, you know. So that's pretty much it. Addendum. It's fun that when you're looking back at your videos, you realize things that you missed. So to be consistent, these should be called thusly. Named thusly and called thusly. Yes.